Gentlemen, please join me in a round of applause for all of our panelists. So we have a little bit of time left that we can use to entertain any questions from the audience. If there are any, I'll come down with the microphone so that everybody can hear the question. And if you have a particular panelist that you'd like to address your question to, you can let them know. I feel like Oprah right now.
Excuse me, hi, I'm Colonel Ronald Smith. I'm sorry that Professor LeGray, so when you mentioned about General Davis, well, at the time, Benjamin Davis, before Congress, justifying the actions of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, what were the specific points that he made at that time?
That's a very good question. He was not actually testifying before Congress. He was testifying before the McCloy Committee, which was a War Department committee on Negro troop policies. And one of the points he made was that replacement pilots weren't coming over fast enough to replace the losses they had. And another point he made was that when the black pilots arrived in North Africa and Sicily and Italy, a lot of them didn't have the experience of their comrades to share with. A lot of the white pilots who went overseas were associating with other white pilots who had been in combat, and there was a lot more interaction with veterans, and the black pilots didn't have the benefit of that. So he made some of those points when he testified to the McCloy Committee, and apparently his testimony was very effective because apparently it killed that memorandum and its recommendations.
Let me add to that, the replacement of the people. In order to complete your missions as a fighter pilot, in those days and go home, you flew 70 missions if you were white. If you were black, you flew until you were replaced. There were Tuskegee Airmen that flew 210 combat missions during the Second World War. Charles McGee, one of the men I mentioned on that escorting the bomber back, Charles McGee had about 180 missions. If you were white, you went home at 70. If you were black, you didn't go home. I don't know, raise your hand in the audience if you knew about that. That was one thing about discrimination at that time. Another reason why there were few replacements for the 99th was because the pilots were going into the 477. And the B-25 required 2 pilots, so that it took away many of the people who could do that. White pilots, when they went home, would go back to a white organization to talk about the combat experience. This was a given to go back to relay to the people what had happened. That didn't happen with blacks until the last months of the war. To give you an idea of the discrimination. Discrimination just didn't start and stop with the fact that the people wouldn't talk to them or wouldn't associate with them socially. It was more than that. And that's something that everybody in this audience should understand.
Another question in the back.
I'm pretty loud if you are. I can just ask. Sir, this is...
Identify yourself, please.
I'm sorry, I'm Major John Williams. I'm from Edgewood Chemical Biological Center. My question is about the impact of General Davis as a cadet. You see almost a 4-year gap between him and Colonel Young being the 3rd graduate and he the 4th graduate, but you don't see that kind of gap after him or happen again. So what did he do to impact the continuity of African American cadets being successful here? And I think it's salient given the effort of the cadets to get this building named. I don't know what kind of impact that had on it, but how did you see his graduation or his efforts here changing the academy?
I think there are a couple of questions there. The first is, remember that I've tried to say in my paper that he didn't do it alone. The NAACP was there the whole time. The Tuskegee Institute was there. Wilberforce was there. Benjamin O. Davis Sr. was also doing it. Oscar the Priest, who was the first congressman, was there. And then he was defeated in 1934, and there's another African-American congressman. So first thing that had to be done was that people had to recognize other African-American congressmen or white congressmen to start nominating. You know our process is about as most convoluted as possible. But the reason for it is we have one single source of funding, and that's the American people, the American government. That's why we have nominations through Congress. So that had to happen. Second point I would make is the people that came right after, Minton Francis in particular, who I've talked to his family and others, said that Benjamin O. Davis Jr. had it easy. And the reason they said that is because people left him alone. And that was not the case with Fowler, Minton Francis, and others who at least when they were there felt that they were much more physically and emotionally abused in ways that Davis wasn't. So, I mean, you can take that for what it's worth. But the effect, I think, is a pre-civil rights, in a way, of these few African Americans who are able to be successful. And it does show in really stark relief that white supremacy is just not real. Because if this person can do it, then someone else can. Again, there was somebody who came here in 1918, Felix Alexander, and then in 1929, Alonzo Parham. So there were a couple, but they did not make it. Davis was almost, I mean, I hate to say this, his dad almost genetically trained him from an early age to be able to survive West Point. And he had the right mother, the right father, Benjamin Davis Sr. was an incredible story on his own. And then I think the last thing that you mentioned was really the effect of cadets here at West Point. And many of you may not know, but they started Operation Tuskegee through CAS, through the Cultural Affairs Symposium. Major Williams, I think you were there for that, were you not? And these were cadets who sort of simultaneously with the Museum Historical Memorialization Committee, which I headed, and Sherman headed the Davis Barracks Committee, formed a committee to find out we want to be active within our constitutional rights, but at the same time to be cadets. And so the African American cadets decided to start Operation Tuskegee. That was a group that through this Cultural Affairs Symposium, sort of the Black Student Union in a way, that started a petition to sign to name the barracks after Davis while we were deciding what it was going to be on. So they did, I think, an amazing job of being activists of what they believed in. At the same time, they worked within the military system. And it was one of the reasons why they were so effective. And one of the things that I don't think came out was just the effect that the cadets themselves in 2014, I guess it was, the effect that they had with leadership from the Academy, and Major Williams was there, Dr. Donald Allen was a major force in that, to help them, guide them to make that happen. So for those of you who are Tuskegee Airmen, it helped a lot that the cadets, the African American cadets at West Point, saw